I can go out and drop 40 every night. You're not going to win shit unless you have guys that play their role and actually believe in what they're doing. Because that stuff is very fragile in the league.
People talk to me about the championship and things like that. I always laugh. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. You want me, first of all, I want to win the championship. But I'm trying to figure, just because a couple assholes on television say, well, he never won a championship, I'm like, wait, when did it become an individual thing? It makes a good soundbite on television, but I didn't realize I was playing golf and tennis.
Charles Barkley sparked intense debate after commenting on the future of the Golden State Warriors during Inside the NBA, arguing that the team's championship window with Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, and coach Steve Kerr may effectively be over due to age, roster limitations, and the changing balance of power in the NBA. The comments gained attention because Barkley framed the situation bluntly, suggesting that Curry might eventually need to consider leaving if he still wants to seriously compete for titles at the same time. Critics of Barkley's perspective pointed to the contrast between his own Hall of Fame career, despite never winning an NBA championship, and Curry's resume as a four-time champion and centerpiece of one of basketball's defining dynasties. Supporters of Curry often argue that his career has repeatedly defied outside doubt, particularly during periods when many analysts believed the Warriors were finished as contenders. The discussion ultimately reflects a larger NBA question about aging championship cores, whether legendary players should remain loyal to declining dynasties or pursue opportunities.
Well, Steve grabbed both of us, and he said, I just wanted to take this moment. Like, I just don't know. I don't know if we'll have this moment again. So I just want to take this moment and thank you guys, but like going down the stretch, you can't help but think like, is this it? Is this the end?
After Draymond Green reflected emotionally on the uncertainty surrounding the future of the Golden State Warriors core alongside Stephen Curry and coach Steve Kerr, Charles Barkley responded with the blunt style that has defined his role on Inside the NBA for years. Barkley argued that sentiment and loyalty cannot override basketball reality, pointing to the Warriors' aging roster, physical wear, and increasingly competitive Western Conference as signs that the dynasty era may truly be ending. His comments immediately fueled debate because they contrasted sharply with the emotional attachment many fans still have to one of the NBA's most successful championship cores.
Well, it's over for the Warriors.
There you go.
I mean, no disrespect. It ends for every old team. You have your run, you get old, y'all let Clay go. You and Steph on the backside of y'all careers. It just passed you by. Y'all had one of the greatest runs ever. If you think you're not in the playoffs, you're not going to make, you think you're going to get healthier for next year, you're just going to get older. That's no disrespect. You guys had one of the greatest runs of all time. If you want to compete, you're going to have to leave there. If Steph wants to compete, he's going to have to leave there.
Charles Barkley doubled down on Inside the NBA by arguing that dynasties in professional sports eventually collapse no matter how iconic they become, pointing to aging cores, declining depth, and the physical toll that builds over time. In Barkley's view, the Golden State Warriors are now facing the same reality that ended other legendary championship runs, which is why he openly suggested that Stephen Curry should consider leaving if his primary goal is competing for another title. The comments immediately sparked backlash from fans who viewed them as ironic coming from Barkley, a Hall of Fame player whose own career never produced an NBA championship despite multiple MVP-level seasons and finals appearances.
It ended for Larry Bird Celtics. It ended for Isaiah Thomas Pistons. It ended for Michael Jordan's Bulls, The Last Dance.
Absolutely.
It ended for Tim Duncan and Parker and Ginobili. It always ends. Sports are for young people. You hope to have a great long career, but sports, nobody wins when they're 37, 38.
After Charles Barkley dismissed the future of the Golden State Warriors and suggested that Stephen Curry should think about leaving, Draymond Green shifted the conversation away from roster construction and directly toward Barkley's own legacy. Rather than debating whether the Warriors still had championship potential, Draymond targeted the one criticism Barkley has heard throughout his entire post-playing career: the absence of an NBA championship ring. Because Green was speaking as a four-time champion who helped build the Warriors dynasty from inside the locker room, the exchange immediately became more personal than analytical, turning into a clash between Barkley's blunt commentary style and the credibility current players believe comes from actually winning titles.
They can't bring the right pieces because they don't have no cap space.
Okay.
They don't have any cap space.
Everyone understood the implication behind Draymond Green's comments because Charles Barkley famously spent the later years of his career chasing the one accomplishment that always escaped him, an NBA championship. After leaving the Phoenix Suns, Barkley joined the Houston Rockets alongside legends like Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler in hopes of making one final title run. Instead, injuries, age, and chemistry issues prevented the team from reaching the championship level many expected, and Barkley ultimately retired without a ring despite one of the greatest individual careers in NBA history. That history is why comments about ring chasing or failed championship pursuits continue to follow Barkley decades later, especially when current champions challenge his credibility on dynasties, leadership, or title contention. In debates involving players like Curry and the Warriors, Barkley's critics often point to his own unfinished championship legacy, while his supporters argue that his Hall of Fame resume and decades around the game still give weight to his analysis regardless of rings.
Yeah, I think the goal is just to not look like you in the Houston Rockets uniform. Yeah. Is ultimately the goal for us. Like, we don't want to.
After Draymond Green brought up Charles Barkley's failed championship pursuit with the Houston Rockets, the exchange became far more personal than a normal basketball debate. For many viewers, it highlighted the tension that often exists between Hall of Fame players who never won championships and modern stars who believe titles fundamentally change whose opinions carry authority. Barkley has built his broadcasting career on blunt honesty and sharp criticism, but moments like this also remind audiences that his own playing legacy still contains one glaring omission despite his greatness as an individual player at the same time. Barkley's defenders would argue that his lack of a championship does not erase his basketball knowledge or invalidate his perspective on aging dynasties, roster decline, and the realities of competing for titles. The debate ultimately became less about whether the Golden State Warriors are finished and more about who gets to define championship credibility in NBA culture.
Hey, listen, I've always said my last 2 years in Houston.
Stephen Curry has often been praised for embracing a version of superstardom built around sacrifice, movement, chemistry, and long-term trust within the Golden State Warrior system rather than simply dominating through individual statistics. That is why many fans pushed back against Charles Barkley's comments suggesting Curry should leave the franchise if he wants another realistic chance at a championship. Barkley is correct that basketball ultimately depends on roster construction and organizational strength, but critics argue that Curry already solved the exact challenge Barkley struggled with throughout his career, transforming personal greatness into a sustainable championship culture. Unlike many all-time great scorers who never captured multiple titles, Curry helped build a dynasty rooted in continuity alongside Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and coach Steve Kerr. That success changed how people evaluate his career because his legacy is not just about numbers or MVP awards, but about proving that an unconventional superstar could become the centerpiece of one of the most successful team structures in modern NBA history.
People talk to me about the championship and things like that. I always laugh. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. You want me, first of all, I want to win the championship. But I'm trying to figure, just because a couple assholes on television say, well, he never won a championship, I'm like, wait, when did it become an individual thing? It makes a good soundbite on television, but I didn't realize I was playing golf and tennis.
Charles Barkley has every statistical credential required to stand among the greatest individual players in NBA history. Over a 16-year career with the Philadelphia 76ers, Phoenix Suns, and Houston Rockets, he surpassed 20,000 points, 10,000 rebounds, and 4,000 assists, a combination achieved by only a handful of players in league history. Barkley frequently references those accomplishments when defending his basketball credibility, and few people seriously question how dominant he was at his peak. What makes debates around Barkley so complicated is that his resume simultaneously represents extraordinary individual greatness and one of the most discussed championship absences among all-time legends. That contrast is why discussions involving players like Stephen Curry often become emotional and deeply personal. Curry supporters argue that he succeeded where Barkley could not by turning elite talent into a sustained dynasty, while Barkley's defenders maintain that basketball remains a team sport where even historically great players can fall short without the right circumstances around them.
I can go out and drop 40 every night, and you're not going to win shit unless you have guys that play their role and actually believe in what they're doing. Because that stuff is very fragile in the league.
Charles Barkley has openly acknowledged throughout his broadcasting career that the defining missing piece in his resume is an NBA championship. Despite winning an MVP award, becoming one of the most dominant forwards of his era, and compiling historic career numbers, Barkley has repeatedly pointed to the 1993 NBA Finals against Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls as the closest he ever came to reaching the mountaintop. His Phoenix Suns pushed Chicago hard during that series, but Jordan's legendary performance ultimately closed the door on Barkley's best opportunity to win a title. That honesty about falling short is part of what has made Barkley such a compelling analyst for decades. At the same time, it is also why players and fans sometimes challenge his authority when discussing dynasties, championship mentality, or whether stars like Stephen Curry should abandon long-time franchises in pursuit of another ring.
I see that stat. There's only 3 guys in the history of basketball that's got 20,000 points, 10,000 rebounds, and 4,000 assists. Man, I'm happy with my career. I was blessed to play for 16 years. So I really got no complaints about my life.
Stephen Curry has repeatedly been at the center of those doubts throughout his career, especially during moments when the Golden State Warriors lost key pieces like Kevin Durant or when injuries and age significantly altered the roster around him. After championship runs and also during downturns, such as seasons where the Warriors missed the playoffs or struggled with consistency, analysts and commentators often questioned whether the dynasty window had fully closed. But Curry has consistently responded to those narratives with on-court performance, rebuilding contender-level teams around evolving supporting casts and proving that his impact goes beyond roster stability or star pairings. His supporters argue that this ability to re-establish championship relevance, even with an older or reshaped roster, is part of what defines his legacy, especially alongside longtime teammates like Draymond Green and Klay Thompson under coach Steve Kerr.
Let's take Matthew Stafford. He's been a good quarterback in Detroit for 12 years, I think. And then he goes to a really good team and wins the Super Bowl. And I'm like, yay, if I could have went to a real good team, I would have won the championship too.
And if Michael Jordan was gone.
No, I got my shot at him. Listen, I met him at the OK Corral. I was good with that.
Stephen Curry has repeatedly faced skepticism about whether the Golden State Warriors dynasty was finished, especially during periods when injuries, roster changes, and aging core players made the team look vulnerable. Those doubts became even louder after seasons of inconsistency, with analysts questioning whether Curry could still carry a championship-level team without the peak versions of teammates like Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. Heading into the 2022 NBA Finals against the Boston Celtics, many outside observers saw Boston as the younger, deeper, and more physically dominant team, while viewing Golden State as a fading dynasty trying to survive on legacy. Curry, however, responded with a signature performance in Game 4, a pivotal turning point in the series that shifted momentum back toward the Warriors and reasserted his ability to control the highest pressure moments on the biggest stage.
Watching, injuries happen to my teammates, myself, go through a year where you hear all the doubts of we'll never be back there at that level. You believe you can get there, but you really don't. You don't know because it's a new crop of guys. It's, the older version of us.
Stephen Curry's performance in the 2022 NBA Finals against the Boston Celtics ultimately became a defining moment in the modern era of the Golden State Warriors dynasty, as he led the team through a tightly contested series and secured the championship in 6 games. After facing widespread skepticism about whether Golden State's championship window had closed, Curry responded with a decisive closing stretch that included the standout Game 4 performance that shifted the momentum of the series. That championship also cemented Curry's legacy in a way that goes beyond individual awards, reinforcing his reputation as the central figure of a multi-title era alongside longtime teammates Klay Thompson and Draymond Green under coach Steve Kerr. For many analysts, it directly addressed the recurring narrative that the dynasty had ended, showing that Golden State could still reach the highest level even after years of roster changes and external doubt.